Dr. Jeff Hall.
好，那我们大家再一个祷告的心来欢迎博士。
Then the interpreter will be Sister Annie.
我们也谢谢有艾莉牧师母来为我们做翻译。
Good evening. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. I think the best part of the evening is the banquet. Pastor Wong said many nice things about me. But he did not tell you the most important thing. I am very good with chopsticks. He tried to bring me a fork. I don't need a fork. So thank you for inviting me. And thank you for inviting me to stay for the banquet, which I'm delighted to share with you. Now tonight I'm assigned to speak on the painful side of leadership. And as Benny told you, I wrote a book about this subject. But let me clear up one misconception. Not every day in leadership is painful. Christian leadership is a great calling. It has many days of joy. There's much excitement. And it is very fulfilling. And while there are many good days in Christian leadership, there are also the bad days that come along. I've been a leader for many years. And for the last 15 years, I've been helping to train other leaders. And quite often, pastors will say to me, Jeff, do you have just a minute to talk? When they ask me this question, they seldom want to give me good news. They want to talk with me about a struggle or a problem or a difficulty in their ministry. And so for many years I've been answering that question and talking about the troublesome issues that leaders must face. I decided to write down what I say in those conversations and put it in a book. And that's where the painful side of the book, The Painful Side of Leadership, came from. Now tonight I'm not going to speak about the whole book. There are subjects in the book like dealing with loneliness. Like what happens when you have to fire someone from your ministry team. What it's like to live in the spotlight of public opinion. There are chapters on how to handle criticism. And what to do when you make a bad mistake as a leader. It would take me all evening and most of tomorrow to teach you all of the book. So tonight I'd like to simply talk about why there is pain in Christian leadership. And some general things that you can do about it. And I am going to speak quickly. Because they just brought another tray of food to my table. I think I could deliver this talk between bites. I will eat a little bit, speak a little bit, while she translates. I will just say one more thing about the food. I thank God for the person who invented walnut shrimp. This person is a genius, and will go straight to heaven when they die. So why is Christian leadership painful?
为什么做基督徒的领袖是痛苦的呢？
Think about this.
想想看，
We value relationships.
我们很看重关系，
We love each other.
我们彼此相爱，
We think the best of each other.
而且我们很高的认识对方。
We work together in the church.
我们在教会一同做事，
And yet still some days it's very difficult.
但是有些时候还是很困难。
So why is it so difficult?
那为什么这么困难呢？
Well, here are several reasons.
有几个原因。
First of all, your followers will still make sinful choices.
首先，跟随你的人还会做一些罪恶性的决定。
When your followers become Christians,
当你的跟随者成为基督徒之后，
all sin is not taken out of their lives.
并不是所有的罪都从他们生活中拿开了。
Your followers still carry with them the taint of sin.
跟随你的人身上仍然有
And
罪恶
because-
的痕迹。
And because of this, they will occasionally do very bad things.
那因为这个缘故，所以有的时候他们还会犯错。
When I was a pastor, some really bad things happened in my church.
当我做牧师的时候，我们教会发现一些很不好的事情。
I remember one thing that happened during an election season like this one.
我记得有一次在竞选活动开始的时候，就像现在一样，
One of our church members worked at the county courthouse.
我们教会一个会友在那个郡的这个法院做事，
And during a local election,
在本地的竞选的时候，
she marked a lot of fake ballots and put them in the ballot box.
他投了很多假票放在投票箱里面。
When this was discovered, it was very bad.
他被发现的时候呢，他就惨了。
Her husband helped her do it.
他的先生帮了他这个忙，
They were both arrested.
他们两个都被捕，
Because they were tampering with an election, it became big news.
因为他们被选票动了手脚，变成了一个很大的新闻。
They were on television.
他们在电视上，
And of course, the name of our church was mentioned.
当然我们教会的名字也被知道。
They had a felony trial.
他们有一个这个
Serious trial.
I know felony. What's felony in Chinese? 他们有一个重大罪恶的这个罪名，罪案。
Exactly what she said. They had a 2-year-old child.
他们有一个2岁的孩子，
The judge sent both of them to prison.
法官把他们两个都下到监狱里去。
Think of the difficulty this created for us in our church.
想想看，这个对我们教会造成的问题。
Visiting them in prison.
到监狱去探访他们，
Going through the public exposure.
然后在公众面前这件事情被揭露，
Caring for their child.
照顾他们的孩子，
Helping the grandparents to learn to care for the child.
帮助他们的父母亲来照顾这个孙辈。
This was the kind of difficulty that sin created for me as a leader.
那作为一个领袖，这就是罪恶为我带来的一个问题。
I have another story about this.
当然，我还有另外一个故事
A。man that worked for me had an adulterous affair.
一个为我工作的人，他有一个奸淫的行为。
When I discovered this, I removed him from his position.
当我发现这件事后呢，我就把他革职了。
He was a minister.
他是一个传道人，
He called a lawyer,
他叫了一个律师，
and the lawyer tried to bring a legal action against us for terminating his
律
relationship.
师就要代表他来告我们的教会，把他解职。
For months, I had to deal with this.
好几个月，我必须面对这件事情，
Many phone calls,
许多电话，
many meetings,
许多会议，
and I could go on and on.
而且要不断的持续下去。
Another time this happened in my church.
有一次，另外一个故事发生在我们教会，
A young man got married to a beautiful woman.
一个年轻人娶了一个非常美丽的妻子。
While he was on his honeymoon,
当他度蜜月的时候，
he started being unfaithful to his wife.
他就对太太不忠实。
He came back from that honeymoon
他从度蜜月回来之后，
and kept his relationship going with the other woman.
他又去交另外一个女朋友。
Very soon, she became pregnant.
非常快，这个女朋友怀孕了，
And all of this had to be dealt with by our church.
而我们教会必须解决这个问题。
Do you understand that people will still do sinful things?
所以我们要明白，会众有些人还是会做犯罪的事情，
And the consequences of their choices become our problem as leaders,
而他们犯罪的结果就变成我们领袖需要处理的。
as we must care for them,
我们必须仍然关顾他们，
confront them,
面对他们，质问他们，
help our church understand how to minister to them.
帮助我们教会知道怎么去服侍他们。
These kinds of decisions
这样的决定
will cause you to lie awake at night,
会使你晚上睡不着觉，
will cause you many hours of prayer,
会使你花很多时间祷告，
and perhaps lost relationships with people you care about.
或者是失去了那些你关心的人与他们的关系。
There's a second reason why Christian leadership is sometimes painful.
有第二个原因，为什么做基督徒领袖呢会是痛苦的？
Now listen very carefully.
大家仔细听吧。
The second reason is you as a leader are also sometimes sinful.
第二个原因是做领袖的你呢，有的时候也是。
When you became a leader, you were not delivered from all tendency to sin.
当你成为领袖之后呢，你也不是从所有的犯罪的趋向里面释放。
And sometimes you will also make bad choices.
有的时候你也会做错误的决定。
And those bad choices will cause pain for you.
而这些错误的选择也会为你带来痛苦。
And you will lose sleep because what you have done.
因为你所做的事，你也会失去。
And you will have to pray much because of what you have done.
而且因为你所做的事，你要花很多时间祷告。
I will tell you just one example.
我会告诉你一个例子。
When I was a young pastor,
当我是一个年轻的牧师的时候，
we had a church custodian who was doing a poor job.
我们教会有一个清洁工作不是很好，
She was mean,
她非常的恶劣，
and I was afraid of her.
我很怕她，
And so I could not fire her.
但是我不能解职她，
And so I changed her job,
所以我把她的工作改了，
and I changed her work hours
把她的工作时间也改了，
to force her to resign.
强迫她去辞职。
I was a manipulator.
我那时候就在操纵这件事，
I was a schemer.
我在幕后操纵这件事情，
I treated her badly,
我对她不好，
all because I was afraid to do the right thing.
因为我怕做对的事情。
This turned into a very bad situation in my church.
那这个呢，在我们教会也变成一个非常不好的。
People became angry with me.
教会的会友开始对我生气，
For several weeks, I wondered about what to do.
有几个礼拜我不知道该怎么办。
Finally, I went to a wise leader.
最后我去找了一个很有智慧的领袖，
I asked for his counsel.
我请求他给我劝告。
I said, "Do you think I am wrong in this situation?"
我说你觉得我在这件事情上做错了吗？
He answered with one word,
他回答只有一句话：
"Yes."
是的。
I had to go and apologize to this woman.
我必须向这个妇女道歉，
I had to ask her to forgive me.
让她原谅我，
I had to go to people in our church and confess what I had done.
而且我必须对教会的会友承认我做了什么事。
It was a very painful time for me as a leader.
所以做领袖那段时间我非常的痛苦。
Sometimes your followers are sinners,
所以有的时候跟随你的人他们是罪人，
and sometimes you are the sinner.
有的时候你自己是罪人。
But there's another way that sin infects our lives that causes pain.
但是另外一方面，有的罪也是影响我们，造成我们的痛苦。
You remember your theology.
我们都晓得一些神学，
Sin is like a curse on the world.
罪是对整个世界的咒诅。
And so sometimes bad things happen not because they're anyone's fault.
所以有的时候不好的事情发生不是任何人的过错，
They happen because there's sin in our world.
他们发生是因为在世界上有罪的存在。
For example, people get sick because of sin in our world.
举例来说，有人生病也是因为世上的罪，
And nature is out of control because it's cursed by sin in our world.
我们的整个大自然失去它的秩序，因为我们的世界受了罪的咒诅。
And things break and cause accidents and other calamities in our world because of sin.
很多事情会破碎，会崩溃，因为我们世上犯罪的原因。
These things have all happened to me as a leader.
做领袖，我都面临过这些事情。
In my first church,
在我第一个教会，
we had a flood.
我们有一次淹水，
Thousands of dollars of damage.
许多千块的东西都丧失了，
Ruined much of our building.
毁坏了我们的建筑，
Destroyed our furnishings and things.
我们的家具也都被毁坏了。
Weeks of pain and difficulty because of that.
因为这个缘故，我们好几周都非常的痛苦。
A difficult situation because of the curse of sin on our world.
这个痛苦的经验呢，是因为在世界上有罪的咒诅。
I must have problems with water
我可能对水有点问题，
because some years later
因为几年之后，
we were building a new building
我们盖一个新的建筑，
and a phone call came.
来了一个电话，
Dr. Orge, come quickly to the new building.
他说：“大哥，你快快来到这个新的建筑，
The fire sprinklers have burst
这个喷水系统已经爆炸了，
and it's flooding the new building.
他把新的建筑全淹水了。
That was a very bad day.
那一天非常不好。
Again, things break because of sin in our world, which has made things which creates destruction.
那因为世上的罪，很多事情会带来毁
But
坏，
it causes pain in our lives as leaders.
也为我们的生命中做领袖的带来痛苦。
Are you depressed yet?
你现在很沮丧了吗？
This is supposed to be an encouraging message.
我本来是要为大家带来一个激励你们的
And,
信息。
and so far, I've only told you the bad news.
直到目前为止，我只是告诉你们好消
You
息，
fought
消息，
sin in the lives of your followers,
因为罪还存在我们跟随我们的人，
sin in your life.
存在我们自己的生活中。
and sin in the universe
在整个宇宙当中，
will create pain for us in leadership.
这些都为我们做领袖的带来痛苦。
But before we can get to the good news,
但是我们讲好消息之前，
there's one more bad news.
还有一个坏消息，
Satan is also very much alive in our universe.
撒旦在我们的宇宙中还是很活
He
跃，
is at work to destroy you.
他今天还在做工来毁灭你，
He hates you and the preaching of the gospel that you do.
他痛恨你，而且痛恨你传讲的福音。
And Satan and his demons are at work to stop you in your ministry.
撒旦与他的污鬼现在正努力的要停止你的
And because of their work, you will experience the pain of leadership.
因为他们的工作，你会在做领袖的时候经验痛苦。
Are you ready for some better news?
你现在准备听好消息了吗？
God has given us resources
上帝给我们资源，
to stand against these painful
能
circumstances.
够抵挡这些痛苦的情况。
Now, as I said in the book,
就像我在书中所说的，
I covered individual subjects in the various chapters.
我在不同的章讲到不同的问题。
But tonight I want to give you some strategies that cut across all problems that we face in
但
leadership.
是今天晚上，我想给大家一些策略，怎么样面对各样不同的问题。
And so let me give you these very simply.
所以我给你非常简单的一些提要。
The first strategy for dealing with painful circumstances is this.
第一个应付痛苦的状况的策略是，
Have realistic expectations about your ministry.
要对你的事工有一个切实的期望。
Now let me speak to you who are younger in leadership.
好，对那些做领袖还不久的人，我先说点话。
When bad things happen to you, you may be shocked.
当不好的事情发生在你身上的时候，你或许会很吃惊。
You went into the ministry with a pure heart.
一个很纯净的心进入服侍的主的岗位，
You're doing good things.
做好的好事情。
You don't understand why these bad things are happening.
所以你不晓得为什么这么不好的事情发生在你身上，
And it's easy to think that you are always the problem,
而且常常想说，哎，可能问题是我。
that somehow your faith is weak,
所以有时候或许说，我的信心不够坚强，
or your calling was not clear.
或者你的呼召不够清楚。
Let me assure you tonight that is not the problem.
但是我向你保证，这不是问题。
The older leaders here will tell you,
这边比较老的领袖会告诉你，
expect trouble.
你要期待麻烦。
Do not be surprised when it comes.
当麻烦产生的时候，不要吃惊。
Recognize our theology, the theology of sin that I've taught you reminds us that trouble will come.
我刚刚跟你提到的罪恶的神学呢，就会告诉你。
Remember, as I've said, Satan is opposed to your work.
我刚刚已经提到，撒旦也要攻击你的工作，
This means trouble will come.
这就是说麻烦一定会来。
And so the first step in dealing with painful circumstances
所以第一个针对痛苦的状况的解决方法是，
is to recognize they are a normal part of Christian leadership.
要认知在做基督徒领袖的时候呢，有一般会发生的事情。
I'm not sure how this will translate,
我不晓得这该怎么翻译。
but in English we say
在英文里我们说，
these troubles come with the territory. They're part of the job.
你的工作就是会带来这些问题。
So I say to you tonight,
所以今天晚上我想对大家说，
have realistic expectations,
要有一个切实的期望。
so that when these things happen,
所以当这件事情发生的时候，
you will not question your call
你不会怀疑自己的呼召，
or wonder if you should be in leadership.
或是怀疑你是不是该做领袖。
Instead, you will say,
相反的，你会说，
this is a difficulty that's come my way.
来到我面前的这个困难，
I expect trouble to come from time to time.
我已经期待它有的时候会发生。
And I realize it's part of my leadership responsibility
我也明白这是我做领袖责任的一部分，
to lead through the trouble
让我经过这个困难，
and not away from it.
而不要离开他们。
A second positive thing tonight
第二个策略是，
is to recognize that God often has larger purposes in your difficulties.
明白在你所面临的困难当中，上帝有一个更大的计划。
As I look back over my life,
当我回顾我的生活，
many of the things that seem difficult in the moment
在那个时候看来非常困难的事情，
actually turned into blessings in the long run.
在长远之后呢，它反而变成了祝福。
I learned when people have had difficulty
我学到那些与我相处有困难的，
and we've been going through very dark times,
我们一同经过黑暗的时光，
God has intervened.
但是上帝介入在其中，
God has intervened to change me as a leader.
上帝介入在其中，改变我做领袖。
For example, God has given me greater humility because of difficulty.
换句话说，在我困难当中，上帝使我更谦卑。
When I started out in ministry leadership,
当我开始做教会的领袖，
I was proud.
我非常的骄傲，
I was sure I knew all the answers.
我知道我什么都知道，
And I knew exactly what people should do.
而且我知道别人该做什么事。
Our church would be the perfect church.
我们教会是一个完美的教会，
It was not the perfect church.
大家都知道，好，不是完美的教会。
And the difficulties humbled me.
而这些
Help me realize how frail I am as a leader.
帮我明白我做一个领袖是多么的软弱，
Deepen my dependence on God.
而且他加深我对上帝的信靠，
And created opportunities for God's power to be shown in the lives of people.
给上帝一个机会，使他的能力在别人的生命当中显现出来。
So after you have realistic
所以
expectations,
当你有一个切实的期望的时候，
accepting the fact that difficult times will come,
你接受说困难的时候会来，
also have realistic convictions
但是你也有个切实的幸福。
that through these difficulties God will do good things in your life.
借着这些困难的环境，上帝会在你生命当中产生美善的事情。
Perhaps not good things in the short perspective,
或许不是在很短的时间发生，
but good things in the longer perspective of your ministry and of your
长
leadership.
远的时间的熬练下，你会看到美善的事情发生。
Another important part of dealing with painful circumstances
那第三个面对困难环境的策略，
is learning to manage your emotions in leadership.
就是在你做领袖的时候呢，要好好管理自己的情
There are
绪。
two very troubling emotions that young leaders struggle with.
年轻的领袖常常挣扎的两个非常重要的情绪，
The first one is fear,
第一个就是惧怕，
and the second one is anger.
第二个是怒气。
When I first started out in leadership,
当我开始做领袖的时候，
I made decisions out of anger.
有的时候我是凭着怒气做决定，
I would become so frustrated with people
我对人感到非常的挫折，
and so frustrated with my situation,
为我的环境、我的境况感到
so
非常
frustrated
挫
with
折
so frustrated with the difficulties
对这个困难的问题感到很挫
that
折，
I would lash out in anger,
然后我就把我的怒气发在别人身上，
that I would speak harsh words,
然后我讲非常严厉的话，
and sometimes even preach with an angry spirit.
有的时候甚至是用一个怒气的灵在讲道。
I also made decisions out of fear,
我因为恐惧的关系做决定，
afraid of what other people would think of me,
我怕别人怎么想我，
afraid my church would discover I didn't have all the answers.
我也怕我的教会会发现我不是什么都知道。
But most sadly,
但是最可悲的是，
afraid that God would somehow not love me if I was not a perfect leader.
我很怕，假如我不是一个完美的领袖，那么上帝可能就不爱我了。
Part of the reason God allows painful circumstances in our lives
上帝允许困难的时间在我们生命中发生，
is to teach us to minister out of faith and not emotion.
为的是教导我们要凭信心来服侍，而不是凭着情绪
To,
来服侍。
to teach us to minister with confidence, not with fear or anger.
让我们凭着信心来服侍他，而不是凭着惧怕或是怒气来服
To,
侍他。
to teach us to make a careful response, doing the right thing rather than an emotional response,
要
doing
让
the
我
angry
们小
thing.
心的提出对策，而不是凭着惧怕或怒气来做决定。
Well, there's two more quick things that will help you in painful side of leadership.
然后还有两个对策，
And I suppose if we're on our list, this is number 4.
这是第四个。
Practice your spiritual disciplines as a leader.
你要操练属灵的纪律。
What do I mean by spiritual disciplines?
我说属灵的操练是什么呢？
I mean reading the Word of God
当然包括读经、
and praying
祷告、
and fasting
进食、
and memorizing Scripture.
背经文。
I have found these disciplines to be very significant to sustain me through difficult times.
我发觉这些操练帮助我度过困难的时间是非常有帮助的。
But I've also found this great temptation.
我也发现这个，
This great temptation.
我也发现我有这个很大的这个试探。
When difficult times come,
当困难的时刻来的时候，
it's easy to become discouraged
我们很容易感到沮丧，
and to think,
而且想到
why pray?
为什么还要祷告呢？
Why read the Bible?
为什么还要读经呢？
What difference will it really make?
这有什么差别呢？
But it is in those times when you most need these disciplines.
但是却是在这样的时刻，我们最需要属灵的操练。
When you most need the security of knowing that you have a close relationship with God.
在这个时候，你需要知道你跟上帝之间有一个很好的关系，
And you practice these disciplines to sustain you through the difficulties you're
你
facing.
继续做这些属灵的操练，帮助你度过这些困难的时候。
And then last,
最后，
and this applies to all the difficulties that you face in ministry,
这个原则可以用在所有不同的困难当
I would
当中。
challenge every one of you tonight that's in leadership
我要向在座每一位做领袖的人挑战，
to develop a prayer team or a group of prayer people who will pray for you.
要建立一个祷告的团队，为你祈祷。
Because no matter how good or no matter how clear your expectations,
因为不管你的期望是多么的清楚跟切实，
no matter how great your confidence in God,
不管你对上帝有多大的信心，
no matter how much you overcome fear and anger in leadership,
不管你多么能够克服你自己的惧怕跟怒气，
and no matter how much you practice your spiritual
不
disciplines,
管你多么操练你自己属灵的纪律，
you are not strong enough to make it in leadership on your own.
你不可能
In 1995,
在1995年
17 years ago,
17年之前，
I left pastoral ministry to begin serving in the denomination.
我离开了教会的侍奉，来到一个宗派的侍奉。
I was very young.
我还非常年轻，
I was only 35 years old.
只有35岁。
I knew I needed people to pray for me.
我知道我需要人为我代祷，
And so I wrote a letter
所以我写了一封信，
and published it in our newspaper.
在我们的报纸上发
And
表
the,
出来。
and the letter said something like this.
这封信是这么写的：
If you are a prayer warrior
假如你是一个祷告勇士，
and you're already praying for me,
你已经在为我祷告了，
would you write me a letter and join my prayer team?
可不可以给我写一封信来加入我的代祷团队？
The most amazing thing happened.
最奇妙的事情发生了，
People I had never met before
我从来没有认识过的人，
who knew of my selection
他们知道我被挑选做这个宗派的任务，
wrote me letters.
写给我信。
I'll tell you about just one.
我告诉你一封信，
A man wrote me a letter
这个人写了一封信给我，
in very shaky letter, scrawl, very shaky
他
writing.
的这个笔迹非常的颤抖。
I could tell from reading the letter it was from an older man.
我从这个笔迹可以看出是一个非常老的弟兄写来的。
And this is what it said.
他这么说
Dear Jeff,：“
亲爱的 Jeff，
I've never met you,
我没有遇见过你，
but when I saw the picture of your young family
但是我看到你年轻的家人的照片的时候，
in our newspaper,
在我们的报纸里，
I committed to pray for you every day.
我答应每天替你祷告。
I've been praying for you for several weeks now, every
替
day.
你祷告几个礼拜，每天都替你祷告。
And I would like to join your prayer team.
我要加入你的代祷团
And
队。
he signed the letter
他在签名，
with his name,
好签了自己的名，
Cal Pancho Sr.
乔康九 Senior。
I added him to my prayer team.
我把他加入到我的代祷团队里。
Within a few days, I had about 40 people who committed to pray for me.
结果几天之后，我看有40多个人，我回身要为我祷告。
For about 2 years, 2 years went by.
好，经过了2年，
And one day I'm preaching at a meeting,
有一天我在一个聚会当中，
and an older gentleman with a cane was standing in the back.
一个老人带着拐杖站到后头。
When the meeting was over, he wasn't leaving.
好，聚会结束之后呢，他还没有走，
He wanted to talk to me.
他要跟我谈话。
He said, Dr. Orch,
他说 ：“Dr.
he stuck out a shaky
他
hand.
的手有点颤抖。
My name is Cal Pancho Sr.,
我的名字就是乔康九 Senior，
and I want you to know I pray for you every day.
我让你知道我每天都替你祷告。”
Benny said many nice things about me as a leader.
因为你刚刚讲说我是一个教会的领袖，
But I confess to you tonight that I am not that capable.
但是我向大家承认，我不是一个很有能力的人，
I am unfaithful.
我也不是很信实的人。
Many days I do not know what to do.
许多时候我不知道该怎么办，
I have weakness,
我有我的弱点，
but I also have a prayer team.
但是我有一个代祷团队。
There's about 35 people out there
在那边大概有35个人，
across the United States.
在美国的各个地方，
They pray for me every day.
每天替我祷告，
They pray for my children
为我的孩子祷告，
and my wife.
我的妻子祷告。
And every month
每个月，
I write them a letter.
我写给他们一封信，
Not a form letter that goes out in the public,
不是一个正式的可以公开的信，
but a personal letter that tells about my life, my work, my struggles, and the challenges I'm facing.
而是一封个人式的信，告诉他们我现在怎么样，我的工作怎么样，我遇到的问题怎么样，然后你们怎么可以替我祷告。
And there are days when I am weak
有的时候我觉得很软弱，
and leadership is painful,
做领袖很痛苦，
but I am able to endure because I know those people are praying for me.
但是我可以坚持下去，因为我知道这些人在替我代祷。
So tonight,
所以今天晚上
leadership will be painful.
做领袖是会痛苦的，
It's to be expected.
你可以期待这个会发生，
Sin is at work in our world,
因为罪在我们的世界上很多，
and Satan is out to get us.
撒旦在这边要抓我们，
But you can stand strong in painful
但
circumstances.
是你在痛苦的情况当中还可以刚强的站立，
Expect them to come.
因为你期待他们的到来，
Have confidence in God.
你对上帝有信心，
Lead from faith and conviction, not fear and anger.
所以你要从你的信心、你的信念来服侍，而不是你的惧怕跟怒气。
Practice your own spiritual disciplines of prayer and Bible reading.
常常操练读经祷告，
And recruit some Christians to pray for you that will sustain you in the most difficult
也
times.
是要为信基督徒为你祷告，他们在你最艰难的时候可以继续维持你。
Thank you so much for letting me be your guest this week.
谢谢你们这个礼拜让我做你们的讲员。
It's been a high honor, and I thank you very much for that for the opportunity.
这是很高的荣幸，我谢谢你们给我这个机会。
And there's nothing standing in the way of you and a really good banquet except me, so I'll sit down.